Hello, everyone. Welcome to this White Helmets virtual event briefing. My name is Kareem Shaheen. I'm your moderator for today. I'm an editor at New Lines Magazine, and I'm a former correspondent for The Guardian. Covered Syria extensively, and it's really an honor to be here with these wonderful volunteers. Just before I introduce them, just a couple of really quick housekeeping things. We have simultaneous interpretation for the attendees, so you're able to listen simultaneously to the conversation either in Arabic or in English. And just make sure you turn that on when you have a chance. I'm going to be asking some questions of the volunteers in Arabic, but the rest of the conversation is going to be in English. So make sure you've got that turned on so that you can hear everything. And yeah, we're ready to start. As you know, it's been around 4 months now since the 6th of February earthquakes that had a catastrophic impact on people both in Syria and in Turkey. In Syria, more than 7,000 lives were lost as a result of the earthquake. The White Helmets, of course, were the first responders to the disaster in the areas that are not controlled by the Syrian government. They saved more than 2,950 people from under the rubble without any international support. And in 4 months on, it's not over. It's not over in a country like Turkey that has all the resources of the state dedicated towards the recovery. Let alone in Syria, where very little of assistance is available from outside the country. The earthquake response, of course, continues with a focus primarily on removing the debris, and securing damaged building and rehabilitating public services, obviously like schools and hospitals and things like that. So our event today is going to provide you with a chance to speak to some of the people who were involved in this response. Hear directly from the volunteers who are with us today, who will talk about their role in the response and what it was like on the ground. And the two volunteers with us today are Ismail Abdullah and Fatima Al-Ubaid. I'll start by introducing Fatima. She's a volunteer with the White Helmets Women and Family Centers, which provide primary health care to women and children, as well as coordinating media and communications activities. She joined the White Helmets in 2017 as a female volunteer, working her way up from becoming the director to becoming the director of a women's center and then a media coordinator. She's currently in Northwest Syria. Ismail has been a volunteer with the Syria Civil Defense, also known as the White Helmets, of course, since March 2013, and was one of the very first members to join the volunteers in Aleppo, which was, of course, one of the main recipients of destruction and violence during the course of the war. He's worked in various Syria Civil Defense centers across Aleppo city, and eventually became the head of the Bab al-Nayrab Center, and also regularly contributed to media efforts and played a major role in reporting on the humanitarian situation during the siege of the city in late 2016, when he was forced to flee it, and subsequently became a media officer. And he's also based in northwestern Syria. I'm going to start by asking the volunteers a few questions, and then we're going to open up the conversation to some questions from the participants in the audience. So if you have any questions, that occur to you perhaps during the discussion and the conversation, feel free to note them in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them. Once around 9:30, probably we're going to open up with the discussion. And before we start with the questions, there's a video that the team at the White Helmets wanted you to watch before we get started with the conversation and the questions. So I'll let you watch the video in peace and quiet. I've already talked too much. So we'll go ahead with that, and then we'll get back to the conversation.
Cities and towns of northwestern Syria after the dust of the These are the cities and towns of northwestern Syria after the dust of the devastating earthquake settled. The once familiar features had been erased, replaced by heaps of rubble where buildings once stood. Thousands of families were left homeless, their lives forever changed by the disaster. Once the White Helmets had finished rescuing those who were trapped and recovering the bodies of the victims, we set to work developing an integrated plan to assist the affected communities. The Resilience Support Program is one of the most critical initiatives of the White Helmets. Implemented in a two-phase plan. The first phase involved opening roads and removing roofs and walls that were at risk of collapsing in order to protect civilians, facilitate emergency response operations, and reopen vital infrastructure that had been closed off by the rubble. More than 160 kilometers of roads were reopened in over 190 residential communities as part of the initiative. Damaged walls and ceilings also being removed in 100 towns and cities. On March 9th, the second phase began, which involved the large-scale removal of rubble, covering all the affected cities and towns in northwestern Syria. This was a crucial step towards revitalizing the impacted communities, restoring essential infrastructure, and enabling people to begin rebuilding their lives. After around 3 months since the rubble removal plan was put into action, our teams have removed over 420,000 cubic meters of rubble across 120 residential communities. In addition to clearing rubble, our efforts included supporting the recovery of affected communities and enhancing their resilience, including providing shelter for families who have been impacted. Our teams have recycled the rubble left over from the earthquake and used it to prepare 300,000 square meters of land, establishing collective camps and shelters for survivors in 240 locations. Alongside the rehabilitation of damaged infrastructure, including roads, schools, and mosques, our teams have intensified sanitation efforts to prevent a potential catastrophe from the spread of cholera. Despite the challenges of recovering from the earthquake disaster, our teams remained committed to meeting the ongoing needs of the population. Within 4 months, we responded to over 400 traffic accidents and extinguished more than 600 fires. The earthquake resulted in an increased health burden for the affected population. Our teams provided emergency services to over 35,000 individuals. Additionally, our women and family centers conducted health examinations and consultations for more than 40,000 beneficiaries, mostly women and children. Even amidst the ongoing recovery efforts, our teams remain dedicated to raising awareness among the affected population. We carried out over 3,200 awareness activities, reaching over 230,000 individuals. These activities focused on safe evacuation methods during the earthquake, as well as prevention strategies for diseases such as cholera and leishmaniasis, and awareness of the risks posed by unexploded ordnance and fires.
9/4/2023 مكان سقوط أحد الرمايات على بلدة سرمين.
Despite the catastrophic situation faced by Syrians, the deadly attacks by the Assad regime in Russia have continued unabated. Since the earthquake occurred, our teams have responded to more than 170 attacks in the northwest region. After years of war, we, the Syrian people, have already been struggling to rebuild our lives when the earthquake struck. However, we did not lose hope. We know that the road ahead is not easy and that there is still much work to be done. When we look at cities and towns as they once were, we return to remember the resilience of the human spirit. We may face tragedy and we may face loss, but we will always find a way of restoring hope and life to our people.
Thank you so much for that video and for illustrating the incredible work that the White Helmets have been doing over the past few months, even after the eyes of the world have turned away, beyond the victims of the earthquake, not just in Syria, but in Turkey too. I'd like to start a question directed to both volunteers, to both Ismail and Fatma. And I'll start with you, Fatma. فاطمة ممكن تحكي لنا عن يوم الزلزال؟ لو ممكن تحكي
Can
لنا
you tell us, Fatma, about the day of the earthquake, the moment you knew about the earthquake and how you started the response and how you were trying to save the civilians, and how you could evaluate the volume, the size of this catastrophe? How did you work within the White Helmets team? Thank you, Karim, and thank you for all the audience for giving us this opportunity to tell you about our struggle in Syria in general and during the earthquake in particular. The earthquake hit at 4:11 minutes in the 6th of February, and we cannot forget this moment. The earthquake was so strong, and it was different than the shells and the fight that we were living for years. Of course, the destruction was immense, and we did not expect such destruction at that. The Syrian civil defense here launched or announced the state of emergency, and as a volunteer in this organization, I left my family and went to the nearest town, Harem. When I arrived to the area, I was shocked by what I've seen. I heard a lot of screams from women and children, as well as men. There were people who were alive, who are stuck under the debris. There were men crying over the families have lost under the debris, and also women doing the same. There were whole buildings that were destructed fully. Along with the team, we were able to save many people from under the debris, and unfortunately there were a lot of victims. And we took out of the rubble the biggest number of people possible. Of course, the feminine or women team was present and did a lot of work. Some took part in the search and rescue activities, and the other part was in the ambulances, transporting the survivors that were taken out from the debris to the nearest healthcare centers or hospitals. Other women, I mean, were at the refugee centers helping, or shelters, helping the people to find a shelter, because there was also a rainstorm that hit almost at the same time. There were some women present at the family and women's centers. They were welcoming the people who had a minor damage or they were hurt. What about those who were in those centers? Were they also affected by the earthquake, because the infrastructure was hit as well? In general, in northwest Syria, the situation was horrible even before the earthquake hit. In this area, more than 4 million civilians live. In the past 12 years, they have lived horrible matters that no one can imagine, shelling and bombardment, as well as displacement. So all of that has had an impact on them. This earthquake came after years of years of war because of the regime's activities. This have hit the infrastructure and also weakened a lot the health sector.
Those first moments after the earthquake struck, and you know how you felt and what your immediate reaction was, and where you went right away as soon as the events began happening.
First of all, I would like to thank who are watching us now and hearing us, those who responded to our calls after the war failed the Syrian people over the past years, those who donated to help us and helped us to make the difference in saving lives. We saved more 2,900 during the earthquake response. And with these donations, we're still now working in the field, working to help our communities, our people, those who lost their homes, those who are now suffering from their houses that might collapse anytime. We have all these donations helping us to continue to provide our services to our people. Thank you so much. I'm really thankful and grateful for you all. You responded to our calls, responded to us in time the whole world let us down, and we continuing and we counting on them, on you to support us in our mission to help our people and our communities. The first moments of the earthquake in that day, to be honest, as a human being, it was more than horrible for me. The first seconds, the ground was shaking right and left. I was more than scared about my daughters and about my after just a few minutes, or a few seconds actually, left the house, and I heard the screams. People I saw in my neighbor, a building of 2 floors on the ground, and people running, gathering to help. So my response was immediately just to make sure that somehow my family is safe. Then I drove from my village to the headquarters. During this tour, I saw the buildings. I saw how the situation was more than difficult. And to be honest, and after I reached one of the areas that was affected by the earthquake. I fell apart because when I saw the first moment, and just in this let me say village, from 10 to 15 buildings, all of them collapsed, and all of them turned into a mountain of rubble. So I was very, very desperate at that time, and then I heard the news about that every village in Northwest Syria had the same scene, the same catastrophic circumstance, and people under the ground calling for help. Every White Helmet volunteer responded, and we're still receiving calls that there are families here and calling for help, calling for any someone to help them. So the situation was more horrible, and then you receive, and you when I went to another village and saw more disastrous scene, many, and when I say more than 10 to 20 buildings collapsed completely, and all of them there were human beings, entire families under the rubble. And I remember, and when I reached one of the affected, there was a father who was working his shift, at the night. He came in early, asking for his family, asking for for his daughters, and he was imagining that he receiving a call, he hearing the voice of his daughter, that it was very difficult on us, to be honest, on the White Helmets volunteer, that this big scale, larger scale of disaster, larger scale of earthquake that we have never, and even in maybe in videos we haven't seen, and we didn't imagine that one day after those 10 years of responding to attacks, to respond to such a natural disaster that was beyond our capacity, bigger than us, bigger than our equipment. So from that point, from that very beginning, we called from the very beginning that this disaster is bigger than us, beyond our capacity. Help us to just to save the kids, the women, human beings from under the world. And that time, no one responded at that time. But who responded? Those who are listening to us right now, and we receive it. Their messages, we received their support, we received their donation, and helped us to save the people. On the ground, the situation was difficult on medical sector. Yeah, in general, in normal situation right now, the hospitals in Northwest here are not enough to receive the normal cases, if we can say this, of people. Imagine that the number of injured people in 1 second doubled more than 10 times. Doubled more than 10 times. I remember a pregnant woman who was injured in the earthquake, and she was suffering from very, very difficult medical situation. Her medical situation, she had to wait for the hospital, and for someone maybe to recover or to die, to take his to receive medical treatment. Then maybe after hours, all the community started to the disaster, the scale of disaster, and start all the community with all the local NGOs start to work, civilians in medical sector and other operations, to prepare temporary camps to receive those who were homeless after the earthquake. So this was like somehow what happened, and this is an example. Other volunteers, we lost 4 volunteers and with their families, or they died during in seconds after the earthquake. Another colleagues, they lost one of the colleagues lost his mother, brother, and his nephews, and other brothers' sons. So it was very difficult on everyone. White Helmets, the local community, the people, even it's far from other incidents or other tragedies that had happened in Northwest Syria. It was difficult to handle.
Thank you so much, Ismail, for that moving testimony, and for the incredible work that you guys did in the first hours and in the months since the earthquake. It's a harrowing tale and an absolute tragedy. فاطمة, بدي أرجع لك بسؤال.
Fatima, I would like to go back to you asking the following. You talked about the people who were present in northwest areas in Syria. Of course, such an earthquake, even in a place where there's no crisis, would be so difficult, would have a great impact, and recovery thereof would be very challenging. But in Aleppo, there are certain regions where people got displaced for more than 20 times since the beginning of the conflict. Can you tell us about the challenges faced by those people who live in Aleppo, the volunteers at Aleppo, after years of war and of displacement? Anyways, they did not have homes maybe, or domiciles where they can can stay for longer than 2 years, because after that it would be bombarded. So can you tell us about the people who were displaced for more than 10 or 20 times since the beginning of the war? The civilian people who were displaced during the war years in Syria because of the shelling from the regime and Russia lived very hard circumstances that no one can imagine. I can summarize that in a situation I've seen. A family was displaced from Rif Hama previously because there was shelling from the regime and Russia on that area. This family was displaced, lived in a camp in a tent for 10 years, and before the earthquake took place, it moved from this tent to a building that included several residential units in northwest Syria. And during the earthquake, this building collapsed fully. This man, the head of the family, waited for years to move from the tent to a decent house because they were exposed to sunlight, to rain in the tent. They wanted access to potable water, clean water, because of the dense population at camps. He waited so long in order to move to this building, and when the earthquake hit and this building collapsed, he lost part of his family and he had to move again to a tent, to a shelter as quick as possible. During Ramadan month in northwest Syria, there was a wind here storm, and many tents were pulled, and one of them was the tent of this man. We at the White Helmet have responded to this windstorm, and we found that the man and the woman in that family were trying to collect the pieces of food that were scattered because of the wind, because was all they got, and they prepared for iftar. But this man just collapsed. He said, we were displaced for so many times. We were dreaming of this building, and the earthquake hit. It took away the house. It took away the lives of my daughters, of my relatives. And now in this very simple, humble tent, which does not protect us from rain or sunlight, came the wind storm and pulled out also this tent. This was a very difficult situation to watch for us as a team. They were fasting all day, and they were preparing for their dinner when this storm came, and they had to pick up the pieces of food. So this is how difficult the situation was. This is in addition to the illnesses at Northwest Syria and the security situation.
Questions. If you do have a question, please post it in the chat, and we'll get to it. If we don't get any questions, I'm going to continue asking questions of the volunteers myself. But please feel free to chime in with any thoughts or any questions you might have for them. Ismail, you're as someone who worked a lot in Aleppo, you're familiar with what it feels like for the entire world to abandon you and to not pay attention to your plight and to the challenges you're facing. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about, the things that people ordinarily who haven't lived through earthquakes would not be familiar with. The material or the equipment that you were short on, that if you had, or if if you had gotten assistance from outside, would have helped you save more people. We're looking until today, they're still pulling bodies from under the rubble, even in places like Turkey. But one of the challenges that they had was that the airport near where the earthquake happened was damaged, and so they weren't able to get a lot of assistance, and that made it so that it was very difficult for people to pull bodies or civilians who were still alive from under the rubble. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of these shortages were like for you on the ground, and how that would have been improved if you were able to get more aid from outside the country?
From if we had and if they, let me say, if the world, the United Nations, that the party that had the responsibility to respond to the natural disaster over the world, if they had and they did their role in helping us getting what we needed in that time, we would have saved more lives. Absolutely. What we needed in that time, we asked it from the very beginning. We needed advanced equipment that enable us, like let me explain to everyone. When you have mountain of rubble, 7 to 10 buildings, floor buildings collapsed, and it's a mountain. How someone can locate that there's still human beings here, so we can uh, respond immediately and save him as soon as possible. We needed this from the very beginning. We need heat sensor to tell us that there is still human being here, and his heart still and we needed a camera that enable us to locate and to know where this is. Here we can work more, and this corridor we can work. This is essential and more than essential, if we can say. But the other side, we needed diesel, we needed equipment, search and rescue equipment that to respond to all the sites. Imagine, Karim, that from the very beginning, after hours, we were talking about more than 100 sites, Then theirs was half collapsed. So how the heavy equipment that we had in that time, the small number of the heavy equipment, how we can distribute it, how we prioritize and give this side and this side. All the side needed the equipment at the same time. All the volunteers needed the equipment to work on the side to recover, to save and recover the body. So we needed this, and this was the responsibility of the United Nations to help us in that time, as they helped Turkey. We were safety all Turkish people and all people all over the world, but they didn't respond to us. They made it a political game. We don't know how they at the end, after 5 days or 4 days, they open it. They take the permission of the from Assad to open the cross border, which is already between us and Turkey. So what happened? We lost lives, and we hope that we could reach everybody, but we couldn't. We did our best. We did everything in our power to reach them, but we didn't have the equipment. We didn't have the that enable us to reach everybody.
Thank you so much, Ismail. I'm going to ask one more question of Fatma, and then I'll get to the questions that are in the chat. فاطمة طبعا زي ما بتعرفي إنه يعني
Fatima, as you know, people outside Syria try to focus on a crisis wherever it is, and they usually follow what's happening for 1 week or so, and then maybe media channels focus on something else. But you are still working on the earthquake, its impact, its repercussions now 4 months after the earthquake hit. Can you tell us about the work you are doing currently in the field? What are you working at? How are you helping the people affected in the earthquake? Can you explain to us how can people keep an eye on the crisis taking place? We have responded to the earthquake crisis. We did the primary response in order to take out the survivors and the victims from under the debris, and transporting the affected people to healthcare centers and hospitals. We also responded by helping the people at women and family centers, as well as shelters, mainly children and women, as well as providing psychological support to the civilians. Currently, we are also transporting the debris of the buildings that were destructed in northwest Syria. Of course, there are other buildings that are partially affected. They were already affected by the war, and then came the earthquake and made made the situation worse. Of course, the environment has become weaker, and this leads to further dissemination of illnesses and problems. The civil defense, Syrian civil defense, is raising the awareness of people about all of that, about the media they live in, about the illnesses and diseases that northwest Syria is witnessing, in order to save them from such diseases. This is in addition to the collapse of the infrastructure and of the sanitary system. So all of that plays a role and is important. And without all of that, the whole environment would be very weak and would lead to further illnesses.
رح اوجه السؤال لحدا فيكم، بس اذا حدا تاني يعني اذا وجه سؤال لاسماعيل وفاطمه انت حابه تجاوبي على السؤال بليز تفضلي وقاطعينا، ما في اي مشكله. I'd like to start, Ismail, with one of the questions about the difficulty of getting humanitarian aid into northern Syria. Obviously, I think the UN is voting again next month on allowing cross-border aid. I want to ask you how difficult it is to get any supplies that you need currently. Right now, obviously, it was extremely difficult during the earthquake itself. Has the situation improved since then? What would you ask of people to do in the coming weeks ahead of the vote at the Security Council about cross-border aid?
Again, the discussion that is not up to discussion is they are discussing the gates and delivering aid to northwest Syria, to those vulnerable people in northwest Syria. This is another 6 months, another circle, another episode of the failing of the Syrian people, discussing the humanitarian aid, which is the right for the civilian here in northwest Syria, as all over the world, those civilians have the right to survive in those difficult times. Those thousands of people who were forced to leave their homes since years. They were displaced from different parts of Syria till now they are living in the camps that lack of the basic necessities of life. They living without even the winter is catastrophe for them. The summer is catastrophe for them. There is no sanitation. There is no any infrastructure that help them to survive. The COVID was a big threat for them. Cholera is a big threat for them, for their lives. So after all the horrible situations, they are discussing and opening the gates for the aid, which is right for the Syrian people. This is irony. This is unacceptable for any human being. I think in the world that discussing how they will close the border and open the border from the front lines, which is controlled by the Assad's forces, the same party that killed and displaced from 2011, since the first day of 15th of March, when they started to kill the peaceful demonstrators, until now they're discussing to give another weapon for the Assad forces to emulate and manipulate the world in getting. There's an example in the south, the Rukban camp, which is a whole world know the situation, how the people are living there, and every time we say and we advocate for them they need more aid to survive. Right now, it's still complicated for getting aid. The Northwest received aid from UN, from different parties. The situation, it's not like before. The countries are improving by time. We hope and we're looking forward to receive more that can give the people a chance to get to their homes and to get back to their homes safely. Those who lost, now they are in the camps, they get back to their homes after the earthquake devastated their homes. Yeah, there is aid coming from the gates, but the what is needed is bigger than this by far. It's the need is bigger than what we receive. So we hope this will this discussion will end this time, and they will renew the mandate of delivering aid through the border, and we're hoping that we will receive, and the civilians and local organizations receive more support, so enable them to help the people to recover the deadly impacts of the earthquake.
It's extraordinary too, because the people controlling, or the countries controlling whether this aid gets extended or not, are countries that have been bombing Syria for years as well, and that's why the contributions of the people who are attending this briefing today, and their individual contributions are so important. It's a big part of it is because the countries that are in charge and that could help are part of the problem, really. فاطمة، عندي سؤال لك من الشات بخصوص الدعم النفسي ل
I have a question for you from the chat about the volunteers of the White Helmets. Of course, throughout the years, you've been facing a lot of challenges at the personal level, in addition to challenges whenever you deal with tragedies or crisis or shelling or bombardment. You are always the first to be present on the field in order to provide support. This, of course, comes with a lot of psychological pressure, and you are exposed to a lot of suffering and on a continuous basis. Can you tell us if there's any kind of psychological support for White Helmet volunteers? Is there any way to help you on this level, at this level, psychological level? The Syrian Civil Defense is providing psychological support to the volunteers, males and females. Now, we face a lot of problems, including the double shelling when doing our work, in addition to the illnesses and diseases that might be contagious and might, of course, affect the volunteers whenever they're working. We, of course, use PPE and other protective gear, such as masks and others, to protect ourselves, but we are always exposed. When we find people under the rubble, we, of course, cannot but be highly affected. During the crisis, the earthquake, I've seen a lot of bodies from lifted from under the debris. I was shocked. I was very tired for some time, but with the determination we have, me and other volunteers, we try to stay strong. We always think about those who are still alive and waiting for us under the debris to be helped. We think about the people that we have lifted from under the debris. There are also some people who were under the debris because of the bombardment, and here we try to stop this emotional affection that we have, and kind of try to be aware that we cannot collapse now, we cannot make a breakdown now, because there are other people who are suffering who need our help. Go ahead. And of course, we provide primary psychological support to women and children who are here subjected to a lot of traumas. We try to support them to alleviate their situation as much as possible. شكرا فاطمة. Ismail,
about the current situation in northwestern Syria, obviously people are not following the war and what's happening as regularly as they did a few years ago. What was the situation like there before the earthquake and now? Like, are there still any bombings? Is the government still bombing hospitals and civilian areas? Or is the situation somewhat stable and you're able to respond to the ongoing needs?
Thank you, Craig. I would like to just to explain the situation for those who don't know the context of the Syrian cause. Over the past 10 years or 12 years, the Assad forces and Russia followed the strategy of displacing people from the south to the north, from Daraa to Damascus, Homs, Hama, until the current situation. Current situation here in northwest Syria, from Jisr al-Shughur to Jarablus, which is the northwest Syria. There are 4 million people, half of them living in the tents, in the camps that we talked about, that lack of basic necessities of life. And during this, from 2020, since the last advance and the last assault that Assad forces and Russia launched to capture the parts of the south of Idlib. Since that day until now, as the Assad forces are still bombing before the earthquake and during the earthquake, the artillery shelling, and after the earthquake during the last 4 months, we documented more than attacks and casualties that by the Assad forces bombing, and we talk and we can talk about the unexploded ordnance, etc., that threat the human civilians' life. The situation still difficult, and the bombing is still going on in northwest Syria. And I'd like to add something. Why the earthquake was deadly impact? Because something that these buildings and this area, they were already bombed by the Assad forces and Russia, and those buildings were a little bit cracked by the bombings, and then the earthquake came and hit the region, and that power made the situation worse, and those buildings collapsed. This increased the number of people who are in the camps, and made the situation worse for the people. And for those who asking, and please follow us and follow the situation in northwest Syria. The war is not over yet, and please advocate and tell your friends, your community about the situation. The suffering of the people is still, we're not in the media as before. They were not the main subject in the media outlets, but please follow the situation, tell your community, spread the messages of the Syrian people. They're suffering, and people need your support. And we have this challenge after days of the renew the mandate of delivering aid to northwest Syria. So the challenges and difficulties of the Syrian people are still. So be with the Syrian people, advocate the Syrian people to help them.
شكرا اسماعيل. سؤال لكم انتوا الاثنين من احد المتابعين عم بيسأل ايه هو الحافز اللي
there's a question from the audience. What motivates you to stay in Syria? Many people have left the country, and the international community could not or did not stand by your side as volunteers and as Syrian people. So what motivates you to stay in Syria? Maybe one of you can start and then the other will answer. For me, of course, I'm responding on my behalf. I've taken this decision in the beginning of the revolution when Russia and the regime started targeting the civilians. I took this decision to stay next to my family and to help the civilians. And I'm staying in order to achieve our goals, our objectives, to reach or to achieve justice, to release those in the prisons of Assad, to release the detainees, to know the whereabouts of the disappeared. Of course, I have a lot of commitments towards my work and the civilians. Thank you, Fatima. Ismail.
What keeps us keeps me moving and doing is just that what we do for our people, for what we do for the Syrian people, the work and when we save and help our community to recover and to help someone from who was injured by the bombing or by this is what keeps me going and what motivate me to stay and it's our home, it's our country at the end, you know. This is our people and we stayed and this is what keep us and maybe me and most of the white helmets and most of those who are working in the field, local organization, members of every they what motivate them just the help that they provide for the people and seeing it to ease the suffering, to mitigate the risk of for people.
Thank you, Ismail. Just one last question before I ask you to give me your final thoughts. Are there any technological tools, anything that can be used today to help people on the ground that, you know, either outside countries or individuals can actually help provide you with in order to assist with the recovery process? Are there any you know, modern sort of technological tools that would actually be helpful, or is it just, you know, like could just be construction equipment, you know, like cranes to lift the rubble and to move it around? But are there any of these tools that spring to mind that you think might be useful to the volunteers on the ground?
On the ground right now, we in the phase of you know, after the clearing the rubble and opening roads. Right now, we helping the infrastructure and removing the rubble. Actually, what we need those the usual cranes, that the bulldozer, etc. That those are the main thing that we need actually to help us to pave the roads and the camps, and you know, in construction, equipment construction in general. But the other side, what we need, maybe if there are advanced equipment that help us maybe to help us to get the you know, the surface done as soon as possible. Yeah, actually we welcome this. We welcome any support that provide us. We will not we don't know the whole technology where the world is, and we are in Northwest Syria, so it's difficult to determine that we need this and we need it. So we helping our communities to recover. We helping the people in rebuilding their homes, and those who they need to collapse their homes to rebuild. We helping every family in Northwest Syria, and yeah, actually we need support, and if this support will help us, for sure we need it.
Thank you all. That's all the time we have for questions there, because we only have 5 minutes left, and I want to leave the floor for Fatma and Ismail to just give their closing thoughts. لو ممكن فاطمة وإسماعيل بس تعطونا دقيقتين أو 3 دقايق.
So please, in 2 minutes each, tell us about anything you would like to stress on, maybe lessons learned, or any specific message to the people, international community, different countries, anything you would like to say as a closing remark. Go ahead. First of all, I would like to thank the people who have supported us during the earthquake, and they are continuing to support us because the works of the civil defense is continuous. We are providing a lot to the civilians in order to recover from the war crimes. As colleague Ismail mentioned, we need further support in order to continue delivering our mission. Of course, the Syrian people present in northwest Syria should be supported by the international community, should support what have remained from this community, because the economic situation is very difficult there, in addition to the problems, health problems in the area, COVID, and the bombardment made and the attacks made by the Russians and the Syrian regime. We need justice for the families of the victims, and we want those imprisoned in Assad prisons to be released. Ismail?
Once again, I would like to thank those who donated the more than maybe, as I know, more than 100,000 people donated for the White Helmets to help us. And I'm saying this again, your donations, are a torch for us in the difficult times, and your donation that enable us to continue our work and our services to the people. And we're really counting in you and your support to help us and to help the Syrian people. And the other side, please advocate for Syrian people. Tell the world what is happening in Syria. Tell about the whole atrocities that committed in Syria, and be beside us to call for accountability and justice for the victims and their families. And we hope that one day that the criminals are behind the bar, and those who disappeared and vanished, that we don't know their destiny. We know maybe we can see them or to know where they are now. They who disappeared in the prisons, and those who are living now in the tents to end their suffering. We call from here the international community, and who can call the shots that those people need to get back to their homes safely. You can do this. You can force the Assad force and Russia to stop bombing, and you can do it, and you can end the Syrian suffering, to solve and to hold those who committed the crimes against the humanity and the Syrian people, to hold them accountable for their crimes.
Thank you both so much. If I may presume to make a brief remark at the end of this extraordinary testimony, as someone who's reported on Syria for years, on the ground, and in Syria and Lebanon and Turkey, and now mostly editing stories about Syria for our magazine now. I've always been, we've seen so much. These two volunteers have seen so much, and I've seen a tiny little bit of what they've witnessed in the course of reporting on Syria. And I've always been incredibly humbled and incredibly in awe of the work of the volunteers of the White Helmets, of their dedication, of their commitment to helping individuals, to helping people on the ground, to helping those people in distress. with complete disregard to their own safety and to their own well-being and health. I've never met individuals who are this dedicated to the betterment of the people around them, to the protection of the people around them, to saving a life. And it's been an extraordinary honor to report on you, and to hear you talk today. And I wish you all the best. And I truly mean this from the bottom of my heart. If humanity had more individuals and people like you, and more people like the wonderful people who've donated to the cause, the world would be in a much better place than it is right now. And I thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, and for allowing me to be your moderator today, and for all your incredible work. I thank you so much for it, and for your extraordinary dedication and service.
Thank you so much, Karim. Thank you for all who watching us, who participated in the session and donated for us, and who cares about the humanity in the world.
To save a life, right? Thank you for being part of this, and thank you for everyone who attended. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day, and keep fighting the good fight.